Hello and welcome to The Arise interview, where we take time to reflect on the big stories from the news and on the fortunes and affairs of the world in an hour of conversation with commentators, analysts and thought leaders. I'm Charles Aniegolu. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, the crisis in Nigeria is deepening, with 2 states in the country declaring 24-hour curfews as protests sparked by police brutality gain momentum and some of them turn violent. The governor of Lagos State, home to Nigeria's most populous city, has followed Edo State in declaring a 24-hour curfew. Babajide Sanwo-Olu said the demonstrations had degenerated into a monster and were unleashing what he called mayhem. A police station in Lagos has been set on fire, and the curfew has now come into force, affecting millions of people. We'll speak to the former Inspector General of the Nigerian Police and to a leading campaigner and supporter of the protests. Coming up. So, a curfew is now in force in Lagos, and the authorities in Nigeria's most populous city have ordered schools to close following mass protests against police brutality, with the state's Commissioner for Education saying the safety of staff and students could not be guaranteed. It follows another chaotic day for the End SARS demonstrations, many of which have been disrupted by armed men whose affiliation to the SARS protests remains unclear. In the last 24 hours, there have been reports of crowds of protesters laying siege to the city's international airport and preventing passengers from accessing the terminals, and a police station has been set alight. There have also been numerous incidents of vandalism in the Nigerian capital, Abuja, with houses, shops and cars set on fire. On Monday, in the Midwestern state of Edo, a curfew was imposed after armed men broke into a jail and released dozens of prisoners. And in the northern city of Kano, protesters took to the streets after accusing security forces of killing a young man, but the police have denied responsibility for his death.
The way I see them yesterday, the aim of the SARS have been defeated. It's hoodlum on rampage. Hoodlum is on rampage. This is my livelihood. You can imagine. This is my livelihood.
I've not seen.
See,
yeah.
This is my livelihood.
Sure,
Where do we start? Where do we start? 18 car bound to death, bound to ashes. 18 car, 25 car damages, over 75 million lost damages. We can see. Come closer, you see. This is not the something. See, burn to ashes. Burn to ashes. You can imagine. Where do we start, oh? Where do we start? You can imagine. You can imagine. See, we pleaded with them. We are not talking about answers anymore, or what? I now realize that this hoodlum have hijacked the situation. Make it porous. Make it like it's not the way they expected.
Obviously distraught businessman there in Abuja. Well, my first guest today, Sir Mike Okiro, was Nigeria's Inspector General of Police from 2007 to 2009. He's been commended for attempting to reposition the Nigerian police areas of training, community policing and service delivery. He formed the SARS unit, the squad which has caused these protests, when he was the Assistant Commissioner of Police Operations in Ikeja, Lagos in 1991. And Mr. Okiro joins me now in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Now, you had a bit of a difficult time getting here, didn't you?
I did.
Tell us what happened.
As I took off, my driver told me there was problem in Wuse 2, especially Wuse Market. It was dangerous for me to come, but I already promised I was coming.
And we appreciate that.
So that's my calling, that's my training.
Well,
I had to come.
We are glad your police training kicked in and you remained defiant in the face of a potential challenge to you on the streets. So, unprecedented protests occurring across Nigeria for the past 2 weeks. How do you reflect on them?
Yeah, I would say initially the End SARS protest was welcomed by everybody, including me. But I tried to change it in a way. I said not end SARS, but reform SARS. But this matter has been on for sometime last year. This issue came up because of the unwanted behavior of people who claim to be SARS men. When I formed SARS in 1991, in Ikeja, I was the Commissioner of Police Operations then. Shina Rambo, a notorious criminal.
Shina Rambo was an armed robber.
An armed robber,
terrorizing Nigeria.
And a car snatcher. He used to come to Lagos, snatch cars, go in a convoy of 10 to 20 cars with headlamp. And he used to mount a machine gun and a Land Rover in front. Nobody could stop him. Roadblocks, when I put roadblock, shot policemen. At the point, anytime people had General Rambo was in town, all the roads were deserted. Even the policemen ran away from roadblocks. Of course, I couldn't blame them because we were losing policemen every day. At the point, I went to the Commissioner of Police. I said, sir, it's our duty to protect the people. We can't just throw in the towel like what have done. Police running away. Nobody, once the senior number was in town, nobody went out again. And I said, there must be a way out. Let us take the battle to him. Let us get men involved, take men from mobile, give them rigorous training for 3 days, go to shooting range, then put them in a room, throw tear gas, in case they have to rescue somebody who is hid in a room, they can throw tear gas. And he took that up. He wrote the Inspector of Police then, who approved it. We started. The first day we operated on Shina Rambo, it was at Bega, the way to Sherry, Ibadan, the expressway. We hit him that day, recovered so many vehicles, they were in disarray. Second day, we hit them again, they were going to Gota. We hit them at Sokoko. They were in disarray. Gradually, the tempo and the operation of Shina Rambo went down. They now went to other states. They were operating from Ogun State and Oyo State. Oyo State and Ogun State came to us, we told them what to do. Soon, all other states started operating SARS, Federal Anti-Robbery Squad, we called it then. Of course, they had armed robbery squad by the federal government, by force headquarters. Quite different. That was investigate. We were just to operate. When robbers came, in fact, even bank robbers, they had the device. If there was bank robbery, they put to position. Once they see police vehicle coming, they look for the police vehicle. So with SARS, we devised the method. What the bank robbery, we send with Mufti, with a marked car. So we're recording successes. They want to investigate cases only to hit and come back. But unfortunately, this SARS came to spread all over the Federation. Every state had it, even though we didn't know how it was created. Some inherited it from their predecessors. No, there's some depth why they were created. Now, further SARS are now being used to investigate cases, bank checks, land matters, family matters. So they deviated from why they were created. And of recent, I think about a year or two ago, I had because I was traveling somewhere, I was approaching a roadblock. I saw many Mufti. Who could that be? And I had my hat in my hand, but I was really with them. I said, well, I couldn't go back. And when they saw my vehicle, they said, pass. When I passed, I called IG. I saw some people who said that SARS on a roadblock, on a really isolated place on the road. How do you differentiate between policemen and SARS? So I think it's really bad. But even so, I do believe and I think, I want to be disproved, that some people who claim to be SARS are armed robbers. Because after you see them, nothing to identify them.
But that speaks to the kind of selection process that is taking place within. You're saying that these are people who are masquerading as members of SARS.
Yes.
But I mean, that has been disproved because members of SARS have actually been identified and fingered by the police, by governments, state governments and so on, and they've actually now, some of them have been arrested. But the disbanding of SARS, that was the initial demand of the protesters. That has been met, but that clearly isn't now enough, is it? There needs to be deeper, more fundamental reform of the entire police force. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree. I do agree because if we reform SARS or ban SARS, the fundamental problems remain there. Because invariably, SARS officers were drawn for the police. Apart from what I said, that some people, some Arabs who, because SARS could operate without uniform, can equally operate on the road. Nobody could really know who is SARS, who is not SARS. But the fact remains that a lot of reform needs to be done for the police. A lot.
But what I don't understand is, I mean, this has been a progressive deterioration in the police service. You were credited when you were Inspector General of Police, which is a pretty, I mean, it's the highest, you know, you're the police chief of Nigeria. The buck stops on your desk. You were commended for attempting to reposition the Nigerian police force in areas of training, community policing, and service delivery. Why could that not have been sustained after you did it?
I wouldn't say why, because I wasn't there. I was not the material personnel there then. But what I used to say often is that we have a bad system in our country where what I call police system assault obtains in every regime. Let me give you a typical example. I have the Minister of Works who decides to build Abuja Lokoja Road. He awards contract to people, give the mobilization, and they start work. Halfway, they change the cabinet, and that minister comes, who feel that it's Abuja Kaduna is more important than he abandoned the contractor on Lokoja Road. Awards contract for Abuja Kaduna. Somewhere another minister comes and feels Abuja curfew that's more important. That's what you have in Nigeria all over the place. That's what you have abandoned projects all over the place. So when I started this thing, maybe predecessors followed suit from what's happening in the system by abandoning those things that started and felt maybe what Okiro started was not the priority, other things to do. So that was why most of the projects that started were abandoned.
Yeah, but one would have thought that something like training, I mean, training is investment in people's minds and brains. It's not something that you take out of their system. You would have thought that that same training would remain with them.
Yeah, also, well, it depends. When I was IG, I found that people in the police were not going on training because of lack of funds. For them to go on training, apart from equipping the training institution, the people must be given DTA. We give a lot for going on training. They will be fed, but there was no way to do that.
Okay.
When I came, I'm coming.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we have to take a break. We'll continue this when we come back. I apologize, but these breaks are fixed. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about escalating protests in Nigeria, calling for far-reaching police reforms and the imposition of curfews. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Enyekolu. Now, Nigeria's biggest city, Lagos, is also Africa's most populous metropolis with more than 21 million people. But today, it's been put under indefinite curfew. For the last fortnight, the city has been in turmoil following the killing of a young boy by police, specifically the Special Anti-Robbery Squad known as SARS. Once young people began marching and protesting against this latest killing, Social media helped throw it into the international spotlight, drawing parallels with the Black Lives Matter movement in the US. The streets have been full of protesters across many Nigerian cities, but much more so in Lagos because of its huge population. It's led to the closure of the airport and the imposition of an indefinite curfew. Here's a reminder of why the protesters have been taking to the streets every day for the past 2 weeks.
I understand anyone getting frustrated that you can't go about your normal daily routine as it was before. I apologize. But at the same time, if there's anyone like that, I want to talk to you personally. As I apologize, I also feel sorry because I'm feeling sorry for such a person because we are where we are today because of some people who wanted to be comfortable yesterday. Some people wanted their daily routine to go smooth yesterday. And that is why people up there have continued to take advantage of it. The truth is this, we know and we are sure that many of these people up there are waiting for us to tire. They'll still start complaining, they'll be infighting. People will complain they can't get to work, and so it will be like an implosion. It's not going to get to that because the truth is, majority of Nigerians support this.
I am so happy that I am part of this. It is not going to be said of me that I lived in a time when this murder of protests, like this murder of all protests, happening in the country Nigeria where I'm born, where I lived in all my life, and I won't be able to give a personal experience of my participation in it. I don't think it's a good thing. I slept here yesterday. I have not been able to sleep here for all the while, but yesterday I had the experience of sleeping here, and I was in Mushin. I led it in Mushin. I came back to Ikeja. Yeah, it's been good. Also, I've seen young person like myself coming out, showing the vibe, coming out with the energy, with the passion of a new Nigeria.
We advise them to continue the struggle. They need to peacefully, which they've been doing, no rancor. They're even cleaning up after themselves. So we're encouraging them and we're supporting them, and they should, get themselves in place for a better Nigeria, which they're fighting for.
Cross-section of the protesters there speaking to our reporters. And Nigeria's former police chief, the retired Inspector General of Police, Sir Mike Okiro, is still with me in the studio. And Sir Mike formed the SARS unit, the squad which has caused these protests when he was the Assistant Commissioner of Police Operations in Ikeja, Lagos in 1991. Thank you for staying with us. And you were making a point before you went on break, and that was essentially along the lines of what happens why there's no continuity of policy in Nigeria.
Yeah. We're talking about training. What I did because of funding, I found that officers don't want to go on courses when they still didn't have money for feeding and being paid allowances. I said, okay. And now attach training to promotion. I said, for you to attend a certain rank, there are certain courses you're supposed to have taken. People are not taking again because then I said now you have to make a choice. Because you don't have money to go for training, because no big allowances, you're not going for training. Then you're not going to miss promotion. Now opted to go for courses to be promoted, even if I'm not being paid allowances, even not being fed. Because so training was on.
Right, but can I ask you this? Yeah. I don't mean to interrupt you. I mean, it is so shocking to somebody who has, I suppose, traveled internationally and even traveled within Africa to see the condition of the Nigerian police. I mean, consistently when they survey police units, police departments across the world, Nigeria consistently comes last out of the, over 100 and something countries.
That comes first, not last.
No, please. I'm not sure we're talking about the same survey, but let's not get into the argument here. The point really is that what I'm trying to understand is how is it that mediocrity became so entrenched in the Nigerian police force? It wasn't like this a long time ago. It's been a systematic erosion of the values of the police, of everything, basically. It's not just the way they carry out their jobs, it's also the benefits, the salaries. I mean, I was looking at something that was published by This Day newspaper, our sister organization, and I mean, a police constable receives something like 9,000 something naira a month. I mean, that's shocking.
It's shocking, actually. like you said.
And 9,000 naira, I don't mean to interrupt you, 9,000 naira a month is less than 20 British pounds. It's less than $20 a month for a policeman who you give a gun to and you give ammunition to, and you expect him to go and defend the people.
You're right. When I was president of police, I went to the president, lecture Adua. I said, sir, I want to paint the picture before you. He said, go ahead. I said, sir, imagine a police constable or corporal. He took it to state command, posted to police post, very close to the Nigerian Republic, living around hot his family, farming to augment his salary. Then, because of mobility of the job or crime situation, he was posted from Sokoto to FCT Abuja. At Abuja, you have no house, you have no vehicle, you know where to sleep. Sometimes sleep in abandoned vehicle or SB vehicle. On a set of 8,000 naira a month. And to make matters worse, one day in the morning, the wife calls him, say, Baba Sule is sick. We take it to the hospital, doctor says she pay 20,000. Then that day, he gave AK-47 to stand in front of Transcorp to check robbers.
And he's watching people with big cars driving past.
What do you expect of him? The president shook his head and said, Mike, what do you want? I said, I want salary increase for my men. 8,000, I cannot take him to Sokoto, not talk of give him sending money to his people. That was how we increased police salary from 8,000 to 31 to 45,000 for constables. So that's how the salary was increased. But now that's the salary. What of other things? No accommodation, no vehicle. When we were young officers, I was a DP in a very small division. I had a Mercedes lorry. I had a Bedford lorry. I had a Land Rover. I had a station wagon. This is a small division, a small post. But now, even division can't afford it. So that the gradual erosion of what should be the Nigerian police force to something else.
What I find actually quite amazing is that these policemen are armed, and in spite of their privations, I mean, they don't freak out and start shooting people because, I mean, you've given them guns but no money and no equipment, and they're surrounded by very wealthy people. I mean, you and I were having a chat about this, and you were talking about, you know, going to America and all these places and looking at the number of people who are shot randomly. And I mean, you would think that people, you know, in this country would be going around. I mean, these guys have guns and ammunition, and they don't do it. And the other point, of course, is why is it that there's always enough money to buy guns and ammunition, but not enough to support the people who you give guns and ammunition to?
Yeah, you see, the thing is that we look at the budget. Every year there's a budget.
Right.
And each budget has its own heading. Do it for ammunition, do it for vehicles, do it for training, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, but you're the one who submits the budget, isn't it?
You see, what you submit is not what you get. Yeah, because you submit a budget proposal, the government can give what's available. If you can submit a proposal of 100 billion, the government may only afford about 10 billion. And if not 10 billion at the end of the day, you will not even have it. So that's the problem. The issue that, like I tell people, the police is not the only problem the government has. So sometimes you don't need to wink at what the government is doing, because the government will cut their coat according to their cloth.
Okay, let me ask you to hold it again. We need to take another break. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about escalating protests in Nigeria, calling for far-reaching police reforms, and of course the imposition of curfews that we're seeing in Lagos and Edo State. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now, demonstrators against police brutality by young people across Nigeria have continued to spread, demonstrations that is, but now curfews have been imposed in two big cities, Lagos and Benin, following incidents of violence. The protests have been largely peaceful until now, but the crisis now appears to be deepening. The governor of Lagos State, home to Nigeria's most populous city, has followed Edo State in declaring a 24-hour curfew. Babajide Sanwo-Olu said the demonstrations had degenerated into a monster and were unleashing what he called mayhem. A police station in Lagos has been set on fire, and the curfew has now come into force, affecting millions of people. In the capital, Abuja, dozens of cars were set ablaze by unidentified men, and there have been reports of attacks in other parts of Nigeria. Nigeria's former police chief, the retired Inspector General of Police, Sir Mike Okiro, is still with me in the studio. Thank you for staying with us. Let me just move the conversation forward.
Okay.
Because a lot of the it's one thing for us to just rehash what has happened. I mean, we've got to find a way to go forward. The protesters are still out on the streets. I don't know what whether they're going to remain on the streets as a result of this curfew. But what would normally happen in a situation where a curfew like this has been imposed, but where the government and the Inspector General of Police has called on his officers to exercise restraint? What should happen now? If the protesters were to go out on the streets, what should we expect?
I think what Lagos and the Edo governors have done should be emulated by the governors for some time. That let nerves calm down with a curfew, so by the time people slow down, there will see reasons. For example, the government and the IG has responded to demands of the people, say, end SARS, and SARS is ended. What then are we on the street again for? We are complied with what they want government to do.
Yeah, but the point is that the SARS officers who are accused of committing crimes have not been prosecuted.
I think
we haven't seen any evidence of them being prosecuted. The kids have spoken about this in the past, and they've been given promises. Simply saying that you've dissolved SARS and formed another unit called SWAT. I mean, you could easily just transfer the people, change their uniforms, and call them SWAT.
I think what's happening is that some officers, some of the news, some of them have been dismissed by Police Service Commission, some charged to court. Let's wait, because we cannot charge to court and get convicted today. There will be a process, legal process, that to convict them or find them innocent. So that is being done. The issue of forming SWAT, you see, police have a responsibility to provide security for everybody. So we do not say because there's an insult, therefore police should go home and rest.
Yeah, but the police haven't been providing that security. That's precisely the reason why people have lost trust in them.
You see, the thing that sounds very funny. When the police is there on the road, doing the job, the source is not tangible, because they can't know that some people want to see or to commit a crime, they see police and they go back. Nobody notices that. It's the one that is committed that is recorded.
No, yeah, I understand the point you're making, but majority of Nigerians, and we have spoken to innumerable citizens, their experience of police is not, including those who've suffered from crimes. I mean, their experience of the police is not of the police coming to their rescue. I mean, you go to a police station to complain of a crime, they'll say they don't have any fuel in their cars, and therefore you've got to give them money. In other words, if you want your crime to be handled, you have to provide money. You've got to pay for that crime. I mean, for that process to take place. A lot of people on the roads, when they are stopped by police, the police isn't there to say, we're coming to check you, who are you? They just say, good evening, sir, whatever, what have you got for us? And you either give them something, or some of them, shake you down or make life uncomfortable for you. I mean, I'm not trying to blanketly condemn the police, but I'm saying that that's why there's so much emotion out on the streets, because that's the experience that most Nigerians have.
Yeah, I was trying to say something before you went to commercial. You see, I was saying that the government cannot fund the police adequately because of what they have. You can see that gradual erosion of the police goes across the entire society. Is it good roads that you have? Is it schools? You see, the fact that the police is a microscope of the society. When teachers are not being paid well, or when schools are not being built and not funded, you wouldn't know. But there's nobody any day you leave your house or an office, you have a counter of the police. So the police, people see the police. And for the police is just a picture of the entire society.
That's actually a very good point.
Yes. So people see the police and complain.
Yeah.
When they go to school, of course they complain. How many people go to school? Of course they complain on the road because they drive on the roads. They complain about the roads. So the situation is so that the police is just a picture.
So basically, what it tells us is about the general level of poor governance of Nigeria since independence in 1960, with Nigeria marking 60 years of independence this month. Not much to show for it, certainly not from the Nigerian police. And you're saying that is symptomatic of the rest of Nigerian society.
Yes, and I wanted to, you brought up an issue that we wanted to have an argument to divert it. I was saying, Nigerian police officers, when they go outside on peacekeeping, I think causes outside, and none of them beat me in class. As a Nigerian, nobody, I think the police officer, American, Britain, all of them, I would take classes, and I beat all of them. You see, the point I'm trying to make.
But of course, police service is not academic.
The same thing. I mean, even when they go for foreign mission,
right,
and the police officers come on top. So I asked this question some time ago when I had a television live interview like this. I said, when the police officers in Nigeria go outside and do very well, when they come back and they do badly, so it's not the problem of the person, it's environmental. The environment that makes them behave the way they behave.
Yes, I understand what you mean.
They go to church, what is working very well, they do very well.
Okay, but so let me return to the point I made earlier. As a former Inspector General of Police yourself, what do you think is going to happen on the streets now? In places like Lagos and Edo State, they've imposed a curfew. If the protesters defy that curfew,
they will not defy.
What do you think will happen next?
If the protesters are law abiding, we're talking of due process. We're talking of constitutional provisions. We're talking of people who can do what they're supposed to do. If the governor of the state, who has the legal right, constitutional right to impose curfew, imposes curfew, he must obey. For example, let me give you an example of COVID-19. When it came and they said, everybody shouts, so people stayed at home. So I can't say this is why, if the governor says curfew, people say, no, we have to obey you. They of course have to obey.
Right, because I mean, the perception might be that this is just another way to try and stop the protests from actually taking place.
That's another way of putting order, making order.
Right.
Making sure people are safe, first of all, before they can go for the business.
And on a slightly broader level, the influence of the security services in Nigeria has been predominant for decades in this country, hasn't it? I mean, going back to the days of military rule and the power of the armed forces to intervene and change things, and the fact that even the civilian presidency up till today has also, to some extent, been dominated since 1999 by ex-military rulers. So you would have thought that that would have, promoted efficiency in the services.
Well, military like the Nigerians, they took for election. Of course, they removed the toga, they removed the uniforms, and put on the toga of politics, and they took for election By the time they're saying for election, just start for election as a general, they're saying election with their name. And people felt it was proper to elect them. And they should be elected. So, and they are ruling Nigerians not like their brigade commander or chief of army staff or so on and so forth. They rule Nigeria as a Nigerian president in a democracy. They have rules and regulations. They have constitutional rights, constitutional means. Of course, if any of them goes outside the purview of the constitution, there are checks and balances. So, they're not military men, they're civilians.
You mean the yes, no, obviously. But I mean, it is that sense that a police officer, whilst extorting money from people, which they do quite regularly, I'm sure you'll admit that they do that, can point a gun at you and say, I'll shoot you and nothing will happen to me. That rather wanton sense of impunity. I mean, that's why people want to see such people prosecuted and some semblance of justice being done. You can appreciate that.
I do. Such people should be penalized. They should be punished.
There are a lot of people who are like that in the police, aren't there?
No. Of course there are, because like I said, for every 12 there must be a Judas. See, if you look at the population of Nigerian police force.
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say for every 12. I think the number is a lot bigger than that.
Simple mathematics. If you look at the strength of Nigerian police force divided by 12, you can now get the number of Judas. It's not like the society.
So your sense is that the way to fix things in Nigeria with the police is the creation of an entirely new culture in the Nigerian police force, because quite simply there is no precedent for that level of accountability, is there? I mean, they have progressively become less accountable over the years.
It's unfortunate, like I mentioned, police assault. When I was in the police, the police had what they called X-squads. It had been created a long time ago. Before I joined the police, it had been there. The first of X-squad was to go around, investigate any police officers, dismiss them, send to court if it's a criminal offense to be charged. But when I was in police, I found out that the X-squad was only based in Abuja. And because they have that money, if a crime is committed, if a police officer commits a crime in Sokoto, you have to send the squad from Abuja. You have to pay him transport, hotel, allowances, and so on and so forth. If a police officer commits something in Enugu, a squad move from Abuja. I said, no, that wouldn't be effective. I digitalized the squad.
So do you think states should have their own police?
Yes, that's what I did.
Right.
So it is easier for them, for the police squad in Enugu, the rest the police someone. But when I left, I don't know what happened.
I was going to ask you a question, but I know we've got to take a break in less than a minute. So perhaps I'll ask you that question and then answer it when we come back. You talked about policy somersaults in Nigeria. Do you think that the political class itself in this country has also been changed, or is in the process of being changed by these protests, and will now view sort of young people no longer in a purely negative light, but will kind of focus on the things that, because I mean, you're sitting here talking to us, doing a sort of post-mortem of the problems in the Nigerian police force. Do you think that sort of thing will also be happening with the political class who are responsible for these somersaults that you talk about? And I'll ask you to answer that question when we come back,
okay,
because we've got to take a break. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about the imposition of curfews as protests against police brutality become more violent. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyegolu. As you may have heard, the crisis in Nigeria is deepening, with 2 states in the country declaring 24-hour curfews as protests sparked by police brutality gain momentum, and some of them turn violent. The governor of Lagos State, home to Nigeria's most populous city, has followed Edo State in declaring a 24-hour curfew. Babajide Sanwo-Olu said the demonstrations had degenerated into what he called a monster and were unleashed unleashing mayhem. A police station in Lagos has been set on fire, and the curfew has now come into force, affecting millions of people. And Nigeria's former police chief, the retired Inspector General of Police, Sir Mike Okiro, is still with me in the studio. Thank you for staying with us. And just before we went on break, we're talking about whether the political class itself in Nigeria has also been affected or even changed, or is in the process of being changed by these protests, and will perhaps no longer view young people in a purely negative light.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. I thought about that question myself a couple of times. And I came up with a French proverb which said, "Le plus ça change, le plus c'est la même chose." That is, the human beings are the same. As you change them, situations, that's the same thing. So I cannot really answer that question. Only God knows. I'm not God. So God knows whether young people come, whether they do well or do better than other people. Only God knows.
That's in the future, isn't it?
Yes, the future. It's futuristic.
Right, but let me ask you something that is probably that you can hopefully answer for us. The issue of what happens to a policeman or a policewoman if they are dismissed for bad conduct, like some of the people in SARS, for example. If they are dismissed, what happens to them? I mean, do you keep in touch with them? Does the police force monitor where they end up?
Yeah, if a police officer commits an offense that warrants he or her being dismissed, they're dismissed. And as whether we have put a tag on him, that's a different question. How many criminals do have data in Nigeria? They have data. They have database.
So basically, you leave the man on his
just
own,
go and
woman.
But
with all the training
if you go to apply for a job and say was a police officer, he was dismissed. You say yes, was dismissed. That's all.
Right. Okay. Let me return to the issue of the protests. And also the vandalism that has taken place leading to those protests, because that's one of the reasons you had a challenge coming in here. There was quite a lot of incidents apparently taking place on the streets in Abuja. We've heard of Lagos, and now curfews have been imposed there. Dozens of cars set alight in Abuja by people described as thugs, and yet no security presence at all, amid reports of incidents in at least 4 or 5 districts of Abuja. Are you surprised that there's been no police presence at all in those places?
Of course I'm surprised, but I've no answer because I was in my room, watched television. I cannot say whether I could inform the police, whether the police wanted to take action or not take action.
Right.
But I'll just tell you, I'm aware. I have such information at my disposal. But why the police did not take action, I was not there.
Yeah, but okay, let me put it this way then. A lot of the protesters have suggested that these incidents of vandalism are being sponsored by either the police or people in government or something to that extent, and that they do that in order to discredit the protests and give a reason for police to intervene, such as what we're seeing now. I mean, curfews have been imposed and so on. What is your reaction to that?
My reaction to that, if it is true, is bad.
You're saying if it
Yes.
is true. I mean, you were...
I was not there. I cannot say if
No, I
it's
know,
true or
but
not.
you were an Inspector General of
Yes,
Police,
yes.
and in your long career in the police, I mean, you dealt with a lot of protests across Nigeria, didn't you?
Definitely. If it is true, and some vandals, I call them vandals, were damaging property, killing people, whatever, and that brought to the attention of the Nigerian police force, and no action was taken. The IG, we call that DPO, recommend that to order. If possible, discipline him for not taking action to protect innocent civilians from the attack of riffraffs and vandals.
Right. Do you think the Inspector General of Police, the current Inspector General, Mohammed Adamu, should resign or be fired for the way that he's handled the whole SARS affair? Because, I mean, apparently last year, the president gave the IG 3 months to implement some of the recommendations from a report on SARS that included the prosecution of some of its officers and the dismissal of others. And there is no indication that any of those recommendations were ever implemented.
I think it's wrong for us to sit and adjudicate because we are prevaricating and thinking that the IG is supposed to have done this, supposed to have done that. The IG is a high office. Unless there's a probe, or a panel, or something that are found in wanting, it'll be different. But as me and you are here, we're not finding wanting. So, cannot say IG should be dismissed
it doesn't need
or
a
retired
panel.
or gone.
It doesn't need a panel. It is that issue of accountability, that somebody has to be held to account when things go wrong.
Yes.
There are cases all over the world. I mean, you've traveled all over the world where people often resign, politicians resign, when it's not directly linked to them, but because something that is under their sort of province, goes wrong, they have to bite the bullet and resign. I mean, it's that issue of accountability, isn't it? And that would send a signal to a lot of young people on the streets that the government is actually serious.
Yeah. We cannot predict or preempt what government will do. Our question is very clear. If you have accusation against somebody, you must hear the third party, as you say in law. You have to call him and hear his own side of the story before you can draw into any conclusion. So you can't conclude right now.
Well, it's not a conclusion. We're simply asking for your assessment.
Oh, assessment that cannot conclude. Assessment that cannot conclude. For him.
But for example, if that sort of thing happens, I mean, do you think though that level of accountability should be instituted in Nigeria?
Definitely.
Where people take responsibility for the actions of their officers.
It's already there. When I was in the police force, we call it vicarious liability.
Right.
So, until the first bit, of course.
Yeah, vicarious liability, right.
It's there. We have it in the police. If something, I know a couple of officers who have suffered for what their superiors or juniors did, we don't even aware. A couple of officers have suffered for that. So, but that doesn't mean before such officers suffer, they are queried. They give their own defense. If the defense is good enough, that if not. So he still here, cannot just stay here and judge the IG and say if you go or not go.
We've got about 2 minutes or so before we have to end the program. Where do you think the Nigerian police force needs to change most urgently? Which part of it needs to be reformed as a matter of urgency?
A couple of things, a lot. One, they just should be funded.
So funding is
yes.
What's the other thing?
Funded. That funding covers everything. Funding will take care of training.
Well, it doesn't necessarily follow because a lot of funds are provided sometimes, and they're often embezzled. I'm not saying I'm not blaming anybody.
I was there. I'll tell you, not enough. Funding,
but the little that's provided isn't used
not enough.
Often.
And funding will not take care of training, take care of equipment, take care of orientation, and everything.
Okay. I have to thank you very much indeed, Sir Mike Okiro, the retired former Inspector General of the Nigerian Police. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much.
That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye and thank you for watching.